Somaliland, still not recognized as a country, is one of places on Earth that almost look like a country. It has its own president, own flag, own currency, even you have to apply for a Somaliland visa for going to the country. Still, there is no recognition as a country. The country has its own military force, police force, passport, governmental structure in it. So why no recognition? Let's explore. The current world is now seeing one of the worst geopolitical times of the 21st century. Ukraine is getting hammered by Russia, while the death tolls of Palestine is increasing every day, and China is constantly threatening Taiwan about a takeover. And the situation of Somaliland is getting more complex without any footage from the global media. Even you will not find Somaliland in the map of the world. There are 193 member states of the United Nations, and everyone just recognizes Somalia. While a part of Somalia, Somaliland is literally a different country, if you might call it. Somaliland is just a de jure of Somalia. While Somaliland is the most country-like place, that's actually not a country. Somalia is exactly the opposite even after being a country. Somalia is even more fragile than Kim Jong-un's North Korea. The government of Somalia even struggles to control the capital Mogadishu, let alone other cities. Militant groups are the controller of most regions of Somalia, and the part of it is Somaliland that is a self-governing region. More interestingly, there are 3 more such regions that governs themselves and elects their own governments. On the other hand, the main Somali government has almost lost its identity from the core. Whatever the government is holding of Somalia is mainly controlled by the UN peacekeepers. Somalia literally is the worst place to live in from every international standard set by United Nations. The life expectancy, maternal mortality, infant mortality of Somalia is always among the highest in the world, while only 8% of the children are enrolled or primary education. Kids there knows guns more than schools. If the data could be collected, Somalia might be in the last position of every list. Somaliland is around 1 mile away from the mainland Somalia. It's in the southern coast of the Gulf of Aden and bordered with Djibouti and Ethiopia. The population of Somaliland is 6 million, and they are well fed and have a better life compared to the other parts of Somalia. The school enrollment is high. Students are going to universities, and also, they are literally enjoying a heavenly life compared to Somalia. Democracy has been established in Somaliland, and politicians have consistently followed the path of democracy, leading 5 different presidents since 1991. There is liberal practice within the country where book fair, women participating in marathon are very common practices. There are malls everywhere. In simple words, it's more than good. But still, there is corruption within the government. There is political conflict between parties. But these are common problems even within the developed world. Somaliland was reported as the 2nd freest state in the world, within a radius of 1,500 miles, even in the initials of 2000s. Somaliland experienced very comfortable and peaceful transfer of power. As the country is not recognized, it can apply for loans from UN bodies. Most progressing companies don't invest or hesitate to invest in Somaliland, as it is still a de jure of Somalia. Also, it is not very rich in oil or gas resources. The country was literally built on nothing. In 1991, Somaliland was bombed by the dictator of Somalia, and literally 10,000 people survived. And the survivors made it so far that the capital now resides more than 1 million people. If anyone actually needs support from the UN is Somaliland. Somaliland is also in a significant location if you watch things from a geopolitical point of view. The conflict in the Middle East is an example of why UN should help Somaliland. And Somaliland's government strictly patrols their sea region, unlike the Somalian government. It's also a place that offers help to refugees. When the US invaded Afghanistan, Somaliland gave protection to Taliban refugees from Afghanistan, while China is almost buying out African regions with extreme loan policies. Somaliland, being such a small place, supports Taiwan. Now the question is, why Somaliland doesn't get the recognition it deserves? The situation of the region is more complex than expected. It is the African Union that has more control over the region. And unlike the European Union, the African Union has its own set of problems to deal with, and a significant provision of the African Union declares to protect the sovereignty of all the member nations. As Somalia is a part of the African Union, helping Somaliland to get a recognition would clearly mean to break the sovereignty of the existing country of Somalia. Tearing down a country would directly raise conflict with its own set of rules. and this will help the other regional powers to start regional conflicts for power. And already the African borders have raised enough conflicts, which was made by the European colonialism less than a century back. These absurd borders have already created enough conflicts within the region. If we look into the region of Somalia, once this country was split among the Italians, the French, and the supreme colonialists, the British. After that, large sizes of Somalian territories were also controlled by neighboring Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. After all these crises, in 1960, it became today's Somalia. Though the idea of a Somalia was new to the people of the regions. Before the colonialists reached the shores of Africa, there was no Somalia. Rather, the deserts of Somalia were occupied by nomad tribes of the region who had fair distribution of power among themselves. From the day one of Somalia, this new country faced some critical problems due to its lack of historical culture. The Somalians were confused how to rule this newly formed state. When it was split between the Italians and the British, the region was governed very differently. The British were in charge of the north side, and the Italians were in charge of the south side of Somalia. And the British had their own style of governance that was not at all similar to the Italians. Being colonized for a long time by the imperialists, people in the north were used to with the British style, and the south were exactly the opposite. So, the country saw major drawbacks immediately after independence. This is not only the issue of Somalia, but also the British, French, and Italian colonialists have made the whole continent a hub for conflicts based on absurd borders, governance ethics, and of course, oil. After 1990, the world saw recognition of only two countries. The first one was Eritrea in 1993 and South Sudan in 2011. Eritrea and South Sudan were even recognized by the countries from whom they went apart. But then comes Somalia. They have no plans to give recognition to Somaliland. Somaliland applied for an African Union membership in 2005, and still the country is on wait. The country was unified with Somalia for 31 years, while it has already crossed more than 31 years apart from Somalia. Still, no recognition, and the Union can't help this issue much. In this part of the story comes Ethiopia, second largest in Africa, and 11th in world rankings. Ethiopia is home to more than 125 million people. The current economy is growing so fast that it has a growth rate 3 times faster than India. Between 2000 to 2020, the economy of Ethiopia has grown by 8.8%, which is literally competitive to the growth level of China. While Ethiopia was literally on its way to become the second factory of the world, war broke out. Between 200 to 2022, the country saw a death toll of more than 600,000 people, making it one of the worst civil wars of all time. Millions of Ethiopians fled, and cities were demolished in this chaos. After a chaotic journey of more than 2 years, peace came back in Ethiopia, and the country has again resumed its progress. Here comes a serious catch of our story. To become a more powerful state, Ethiopia needs something else, and that is the ocean. To rise to its extreme economic potential, Ethiopia needs higher influence on the sea. The last century has taught us agriculture is not the future anymore. It's factory-based manufacturing that will lead to success in the 21st century, and to rise to its economic potential, Ethiopia needs new industries and the sea to transport homemade products. While cheap labor is the main reason behind building a strong economy, Ethiopia has a large cheap labor force that will ensure making products for the rich consumers waiting in the West. But the problem is, Ethiopia has no access to the sea. Though it is one of the largest countries in the world, you can call Ethiopia a geographic prison. Before all the Africans in the comment box get angry, it is what the Ethiopian Prime Minister has called the country. Though it is one of the largest countries in the world, it is surrounded with unfriendly neighbors like Eritrea. And today's topic, Somalia. These are the countries that restricts Ethiopia from connecting to the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden. Half of the Ethiopian borders are within 200-mile range of the Red Sea and still can't touch it. And adding to this injury, it was the last second free state of Africa, Eritrea, who literally broke away from Ethiopia and took control over the sea. There are 44 landlocked countries in the world. Among these countries, Ethiopia is literally the largest. No other country has such a labor force waiting for getting access to the sea. Currently, the goods produced in Ethiopia are shipped through Djibouti. This small nation is between Eritrea and Somalia, creating a passage for Ethiopia. Here, Djibouti is not the friendly neighbor you are thinking of. They already know the limitations of Ethiopia and charges high taxes for the shipped goods. 43% of Djibouti's GDP is earned through the port tax it gets from Ethiopia, which is $1.5 billion every year. And this takes away 10% of the public budget of Ethiopia. That's how Djibouti is robbing Ethiopia in the name of the friendly neighbor. Djibouti has literally the power to disconnect Ethiopia from the world. Now the questions are, why doesn't Ethiopia make a deal with its divorced part, Eritrea? The problem is, it has to keep Eritrea's weaker economy to practice power over the region, and giving money would not help the cause. And if you remember the starting points of our video, you will not suggest Somalia. So here comes the final option. Somaliland. This non-country state has a proper government, and also, it will negotiate at a lower price too. In January 1, 2024, the leaders of Ethiopia and Somaliland made the deal of the century for both the states. This deal will provide Ethiopia access to a 12-mile road to the coastline for the next 50 years. And in exchange, Ethiopia will provide a part of profit from the state airlines to Somaliland. Win-win for both. And adding to that, Somaliland most importantly gets recognition from Ethiopia as the first United Nations member to recognize the country. Now, who are the losers of this agreement? Obviously, Somalia. Somalia has already opposed this deal, as this is against the sovereignty of Somalia, and also, it will help Somaliland to get stronger. But Somalia is in no position to stop Ethiopia to make deals with anyone. Ethiopia would literally demolish Somalia if a war takes place. But another issue here is, opening doors of Somaliland would provide Ethiopia access to Somalian territories in simple words. And this can be a major problem for the future of the nation Somalia. Making Ethiopia entering their territories would also create opportunities for militant groups to start conflict against the government of Somalia, only to avoid conflict in the region. United States have opposed the deal. Adding more to the problem, we all know how far the Ethiopians can go when it comes to conflicts. Only the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Palestinian death tolls have literally took focus away from the 600,000 death toll of Ethiopia. Letting Ethiopia create a new passage with their new friend Somaliland will only raise the conflicts within the region.